Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. I'm Bill Horan, along with my co-host, Nassau Community College student Mike DeMarco.
Bill, I've decided to consult a lawyer for today's show.
Wait a minute. What's the matter? Do I owe you money?
No, nothing like that, Bill. Today, we are going to learn about the law in the areas of real estate, personal injury, and commercial litigation with our guest and friend of the show, Enza Brandi, Esquire.
That's right. Enza is the founder of the Enza Brandi Law Firm with an office in Huntington Station here on Long Island. Enza, welcome to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thank you, Bill. It's my pleasure to be here, and nice to meet you, Mike.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Enza, tell us about the nature of your practice and how long you've been practicing law.
Well, Bill, I have been practicing law since 1993, which I think is longer than most of these students here at Nassau Community College have even been alive.
And what's the nature of your practice? What type of areas?
I do mainly personal injury, a lot of real estate closings, and commercial and various general types of litigation.
With regard to your personal injury practice, what are the main types of cases that you take?
Well, of course, the most common type of personal injury action is a motor vehicle case. In addition to that, there's slip and fall cases and labor law cases, which are very specialized types of cases that fall under New York State labor law sections 240 and 241, involving construction sites and falls from elevation.
As you can see, Enza likes to argue with people. She takes all these kind of cases, automobile accidents, labor law cases, and of course, I guess other negligence, it's called, slip and fall, and if people get injured because of some type of, maybe not an automobile accident, but it could be just an accident in a store or something falling on them. Is that correct?
Right, of course. Any type of personal injury, you can consult my firm. We'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Now, I've heard it said that there's two aspects to a personal injury case. Can you tell our audience what those are?
Yes. So every personal injury case, whether it's motor vehicle, slip and fall, involves a liability aspect, meaning how did the accident happen, who is at fault, and of course New York State has what's called comparative negligence. So it may not be 100% fault on either party involved, but it may be an apportioned type of liability. Very often there is a car accident that happens in an intersection. And with no witnesses, both parties say, I had the green light, no, I had the green light. Something like that could be assessed at a 50-50 liability. And that would also be a case where you would look at certain aspects of the claim, where in the intersection, where is the damage on the vehicles, that type of thing to make an assessment and to make a determination as far as comparative fault.
And that's really very sensible because, to be honest, I guess many accidents, or maybe even most, really do fall into that. It's not all my fault or your fault. Maybe I was driving a little too fast, but maybe you turned before the light, or maybe you were trying to cross the street quickly or something. So it's something that should be apportioned and not just blame me or you or some other party in the group.
Absolutely.
I'm learning a lot. This is great.
And I know we've all been there. We've all have had accidents before.
Speak for yourself. I'm a good driver.
I've had accidents
don't
before.
Listen to that man. I'm a good driver.
Well, accidents do happen, and I'm sure many people can relate to them. Hopefully, most are less severe than some turn out to be. But when someone does have a car accident, what steps should they take at the scene?
Okay, well, it's very, very important to call the police. You do want a police report to be taken. That will confirm the date, the time, the parties involved. Certainly all parties involved should remain at the scene. It's also advisable not to move your vehicle until the police arrive so that it can be documented where the accident actually did happen, where the points of contact are, if the vehicles are touching each other. Things like that become very important in determining liability.
Enza, did you notice I just said I'm not guilty and I don't have accidents, and I'm writing notes and Mike is taking notes, so it kind of belies what we're saying here. But now you said call the police. I just want to know, does that mean call the police if I'm not injured, if there's no one in the back seat of the car, if it's what we might call a fender bender?
Bill, many people don't feel pain until sometime after an accident. Adrenaline is running. or certain injuries may not be of the type where you do feel the pain right away. So, even if you are not injured, even if you are never injured in the accident, you don't feel pain at all, even after the fact, it's important because, for various reasons, you want to report that claim to your insurance carrier right away. You need documentation in case the other party is injured and ultimately brings a claim against you.
And of course, I guess what happens at that moment, if you have the police there, you're both going to give the most accurate portrayal as opposed to 5 days later or 10 days later or something like that.
Absolutely. So you be careful what you say to the police. Many of your comments will be documented on the police report. Not that you should tailor your statements to what you think you should say. Obviously, be honest about what happened, but, just know that the police will be documenting. And hopefully, if there are witnesses at the scene, hopefully the police will also take witness statements, which will ultimately be very helpful in getting a case settled or resolved.
Did you get all that, Mike? Are you taking notes?
I think I got it all down.
You got it all down? Okay. So I guess the reminder to the audience is even if you are not what you might call hurt, you're not bleeding, maybe you got a bruise on your arm or something, or your head flopped back a little bit because you got hit in the rear, but you're kind of saying make sure you report all that.
Absolutely.
Follow up and have it checked.
Yes. And you will be asked by the police if you want an ambulance. If you are feeling any type of pain at all, it's important to get checked out. If you have any kind of head injury or head trauma, if you hit your head, if you're feeling something in your neck or back, it's always important to get checked out.
And then you have an official record aside from everything else, I guess, at the hospital or the medical office or the ER room. So
absolutely, yes. And I know accidents are very traumatic for people. But very often people will call a family member or friend to the scene of the accident. If somebody's there with you, have them take pictures of the damage to the other vehicle, of the area. If there are skid marks, things like that are important. If you're hurt in an accident, obviously that's not the first thing you're going to be thinking of. But if you call someone and someone's there with you, that's important. We all have our cell phones now, so we all have cameras and video
now, Mike,
cameras.
You're much younger than me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you, did anybody ever teach you this stuff, like what to do if there's an accident, just the way Enza's telling us today?
I think some of the steps. I mean, usually it's the whole, I've been in little fender benders before where both people agree, oh, it's nothing. We both drive our separate ways. But I've also, been around for other accidents where, if you got some damage, cover yourself, call the police.
Right.
Even if it's your fault, you're the one who took initiative and tried to do the right thing. And, God forbid someone else gets injured, at least you did your part and at least tried to, help somebody else out. So I guess it's all about, I guess what I've been told in the past, is just cover yourself, whatever means may be.
And a great idea that Enza just mentioned today, and I wrote it down, pictures. We all have the cell phone, so you can go out and take a picture of the car that in the event something happened to the other car a week later, and they say that happened in your accident, you say, no, there's the picture of it.
I think everyone does that now. No matter how small, everyone's taking videos and pictures of their whole life anyway. So,
Absolutely. Hey, we've all seen my cousin Vinny. Those skid marks made a big difference.
yeah, exactly. Now, how soon after this whole process would one actually want to consult an attorney?
I think it's important to consult an attorney right away because there are certain timeframes that have to be adhered to. Mm-hmm. There is a no-fault application that has to be filed with any motor vehicle accident that puts a carrier on notice of medical treatment and allows for the carrier to pay your medical bills. Now, no fault is a particular provision in every motor vehicle policy that allows for payment of any kind of medical treatment, travel to and from your medical facilities if you need that, lost wages, etc. And it's through your own policy, through the policy that you are in at the time of the accident, called no fault because regardless of whose fault it is, that claim, that portion of the claim goes through that vehicle that you're in at the time of the accident, as opposed to a liability claim that would be made against the other vehicle.
But now that would also depend on one's the type of coverage that person has?
Yeah. So
okay.
The minimum coverage in New York State is $25,000. Most policies have a $50,000 no-fault limit. Now, your own carrier will not normally advise you to increase that limit, and you can't do that unless you have a policy that's greater than the 25. So if you have 100 over 3, or a greater policy, it's important to increase your no-fault limits. I had a client recently, an older man, who was crossing the street and was hit by a Suffolk County bus, which...
Oh, my goodness.
I was very surprised to find out that they carried the minimum no-fault policy of $50,000. So this man was hospitalized. He had several surgeries, including a splenectomy, and he spent 10 days in the hospital. Before he was even discharged, his no-fault limits had expired. And for him, it made a big difference because any further treatment then would have to go through Medicare, which in the end, Medicare will have a lien on any recovery that he gets.
Oh, wow.
So some policies will, some won't. It depends on the type of policy. So the no-fault coverage, if you have a greater than $25,000, greater than minimum policy, it's important to take a look and see if your no-fault coverage is, has a larger limit.
Well, definitely list that as one of my steps just in case I do get in another accident. But before we continue, I just want to add that you are listening to My Hometown on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Mike DeMarco along with Bill Horan, and today we are learning all about real estate law, personal injury law, and commercial litigation with our guest and friend of the show, Enza Brandi Esquire, the founder of the Enza Brandi Law Firm, with an office in Huntington Station. Bill?
Now, Enza, you mentioned the word carrier, and just for the uninitiated, is that another way of saying the insurance company?
Yes,
okay.
It is. Yes,
so that's who we should call. We're Allstate or State Farm or whoever. We call them up or get in touch with them immediately.
Yes, you will report your claim, but your attorney will file your no-fault application for you.
Okay.
So, when it is important to consult an attorney right away. What we do initially is we obviously take in all the information. We get copies of your insurance card and your driver's license, and we will set up both the liability claim, meaning the claim against the other vehicle, and the no-fault claim, which will cover your medical expenses. So that, this way we'll be able to provide you with a claim number when you go to your doctors, and assuming they are no-fault doctors, that they do take no-fault, most doctors do, they will have that information to submit the medical bills.
Now, a tough question I have to ask you. Someone's in an accident. They say, oh, my gosh, this was terrible. I have damage to the car. Somewhere in there I'm going to have to pay for it. I'm going to be inconvenienced. Now they go to see you or another attorney. What are fee arrangements like for something in a negligence case? How is this treated?
They are all on contingency, meaning we don't get paid until we have some kind of recovery, whether it's by settlement or by trial verdict. Most of our cases do settle. So we take a third of whatever the recovery is.
So if I walk in to see you and what you're talking about, filing this with no fault and doing all this, I'm not going to have to pay you another fee on top of the problems I already have.
Nope, not a dime until we get your case
Did
resolved.
you hear that?
I heard that.
She's my favorite lawyer. No, but that really is something that I think most people may not be aware of. They do have to pay their doctor in fairness because the doctor is doing something, I guess. But at least legal-wise, they can get advice, so they're foolish not to if they don't. And then if time passes too long, you could really be past an expiration point for filing a notice or something like that.
Right. And, as a matter of fact, there are other notices that may be relevant to your claim. I recently had a woman who went to the Oyster Festival, and she had a slip and fall accident somewhere on a soft curve between two intersecting blocks. And the funny thing about her accident was that if it's determined that it happened on one block, it was the county of Nassau. If it was on the other intersecting block, it was the town.
Wow.
So we had to file what's called a notice of claim against both the county and the town. That's a notice that has to be filed against any municipality within 90 days of an accident. And it has to have very specific information contained in it, or it could be deemed to be improper notice and preclude you from bringing your claim against a municipality. That goes also with car accidents. If you have an accident with a garbage truck or a town vehicle or something of that nature, a notice of claim has to be filed.
Now,
I'm sorry, Mike, but I just
No, it's
maybe
okay.
you want to bring this out.
Yeah.
That I guess we all think there's years that this can be done, or we can go see the lawyer 6 months later. But you said 90 days.
That's a 90-day
Is that
period.
correct?
Yes, a notice of claim is a 90-day
So
period.
some of these things, you're on a tight notice, and let's just say someone hurt their shoulder. Well, they might be in the hospital, incapacitated, lose a few days from work. Now all of a sudden 10 or 15 days have passed. They have to get an appointment with your office, assumingly that they can get it in 2 or 3 days, or maybe that same day. But don't dawdle is, I guess, what you're telling people.
Absolutely, yep. The notice of the no-fault application has to be filed right away. And, that's important because when your medical treatment is paid through no fault, there are no deductibles. And, the medical treatment generally doesn't get exhausted, the $50,000, because it goes by a shorter schedule or a less. The doctors get paid lesser according to the no-fault schedule.
So those are all things I think that most people wouldn't think of. And, of course, as a retired lawyer, I can tell you, when do they call up? Friday at 6:15, just when you're walking out the door. And the 90-day period expires on Saturday. So then there's extra costs and problems and last-minute running around.
Well,
so,
Bill, you know me. I always try to accommodate.
You're very good, but it's tough for everybody, those last-minute cases. So I'm sorry, Mike, but I just wanted to bring that out in case anybody...
It's quite all right. It's actually very informative. But I was curious, with slip and fall cases, since we're on the subject, how would that differ maybe from car accidents, so to speak? Would you want to take similar steps in terms of how you cover yourself after the accident?
So the slip and fall cases are a different animal as far as liability. With the motor vehicle accidents, you have more objective findings to look at to determine liability. The points of impact on the vehicles, skid marks, witness statements if you have witness statements. But with the slip and fall accidents, it's incumbent on the claimant or the plaintiff to prove not only that there was an existing defect, but that the property owner had sufficient notice of that defect. Now, municipal cases are a little different with that as well, because the notice of the defect has to be what they call actual notice. They have to have gotten a lot of municipalities require under their town codes or their city codes prior written notice of the defect. So if they don't actually have something in writing saying that on 9th Street at the intersection of Broadway there is a pothole, then you don't have a claim. So it's kind of difficult. A lot of other slip and fall accidents, I get calls from people who say, I fell, I hurt my leg when I was walking down the street, but they're not able to tell me the exact location or what caused them to fall. With the slip and fall accidents, you have to be able to pinpoint your defect. It has to be very well documented. And as far as notice to the property owner, it has to be, if it's something that has existed for a sufficiently long time, that they should have known about the defect, then arguably that could be sufficient notice. So you're walking down the street and you fall on a sidewalk flag that's very uneven. A lot of town codes, although, the sidewalks are under the ambit of the town, a lot of town codes require the property owner to be responsible for repair of sidewalks, which, is smart if you're the town, but puts the onus on the property owner. So the case I was just talking about, the woman walking down the street, and she was right at the intersection with two properties. It was kind of difficult to determine where one ended, so which of the two property owners was the responsible party until surveys were done. And in that case, you always do want to put the municipalities on notice and bring them into the action. So, like I said, in that particular case, this poor woman going to the Oyster Festival fell and broke her nose.
Ooh.
And such a nice person, too. And so we had two property owners and two municipalities involved in that litigation. We just recently settled it. So, all is well that ends well, as I said.
Good. That's the main, the win for everybody.
Well, before we continue, I just want to add once again that you are listening to My Hometown on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Mike DeMarco, along with Bill Horan, and today we are learning all about real estate law, personal injury law, commercial litigation with our guest, and friend of the show, Enza Brandi Esquire, the founder of the Enza Brandi Law Firm, with an office in Huntington Station. Now, I'm curious, with slip and fall cases, I'd imagine they're pretty difficult sometimes because, sometimes there's not always a witness, right?
Yes.
Like people are walking down the street. I know you mentioned you get some calls about people, they can't really support their claims so much. But are there ever instances where you have to do a lot of legwork in terms of actually finding out what happened? I mean, for someone, I guess, who was injured and no one else was around to see it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With the sidewalk cases or the pothole cases, certainly those defects can be documented after the fact. We go to the scene, we take pictures. But the slip and fall cases that might happen, say in a supermarket where somebody falls on a mushed peach on the floor, something that's a transitory defect, a puddle of water in a supermarket or, something else. Those cases, if something happens like that, it's very important to make a report. Because those are what they call transitory cases. The peach gets cleaned up or the puddle gets mopped up and the defect is gone and there's no way to document it after the fact. If it's just you, no witnesses. So if something like that happens, it's extremely important to, have a report taken. Every store will take what they call an incident report and document what happened.
So I guess one key takeaway here, similar to, car accidents, is that you always want to, take note of your surroundings and, take pictures if you can. Just cover yourself like you would in any accident. Which
is not always easy when you're under a circumstance that's
especially
dramatic.
If you're hurt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, I'll tell you, and Enza, years ago, this is a long time ago, I actually slipped on a string bean in a store. Now,
Get out of here.
It turned out it was no big issue and no lawsuit or anything about it. But you don't realize something like that, it can throw you back out at the moment. I thought my back was really going to go out. And then, after a minute or two had passed and everything was fine. But something that small on the floor could cause one of these problems.
Absolutely.
And lead to a lawsuit. So, I've heard many people say, I didn't tell the store manager, I just fell or slipped or something. I guess one of the most important things is file the report, get that in with the store, let them know it, and get the guy's name or the lady's name that you talked to.
Right. Again, you might think you're fine, but the next day you may not be able to get out of bed because, your injury may be more severe than you feel at the scene.
And sadly, Enza's seen these cases, as she said, for many years, so it does happen. Is there anything you'd recommend to us and to our audience that, as far as insurance goes, that maybe everybody should do, or the one tip that everybody falls into or fails to do when there is an accident, or should we up the insurance?
Yes. That's an interesting question, Bill. Just like your no-fault coverage, which is important to have excess if you're able to do that. And again, that's only in a case where you're carrying more than the minimum policy of 25. So if you have a greater policy, if you have 100 over 3 or higher limit policy, you can increase your no-fault coverage. But every policy also has what's called SUM coverage. And that's something that when you're having your insurance carrier write the policy, they will not generally tell you about, because what that is underinsurance and supplemental. It's uninsured and supplemental on underinsurance. So let's say you're involved in a car accident with somebody who doesn't have insurance at all, or it's a hit and run accident and you're hurt at the scene. So now you want to bring a claim. That's when you would bring it under your policy, your uninsured motor vehicle coverage in your own policy. Without increasing the limits, that's a $25,000 limit. To increase those limits, and again, you have to have more than a $25,000 liability policy to be able to increase that portion of your policy. But to increase those uninsured motor vehicle limits is extremely inexpensive. But of course, your insurance carrier doesn't tell you that because that's more money coming out of their pocket potentially. Similarly, the supplemental underinsured provision of your policy is if you are involved in an accident with someone who doesn't carry sufficient coverage. So let's say you have an accident and the other vehicle has a $25,000 policy, but you break your arm and you can't work for 6 months, or, you break both arms, you have more severe injuries. Once you have exhausted that policy, so in other words, once you've settled against the other carrier for that $25,000, now you can go under your own policy for your supplemental underinsurance. But in order to access that underinsurance, it has to be greater than the policy limits of the other vehicle. So if you have the minimum $25,000 policy, that won't help you.
Right away, I'm making a note. I'm going to ask my insurance company about that if I have it, because it's so likely that something could happen, or sadly that someone does some damage to the car or whatever and just takes off, or does damage to you and takes off. And we read about it every day. And if this is so inexpensive and something we should have.
It's very inexpensive.
And you're on the battlefield. You see this every day. But I think the risk-reward compared to getting a $50,000 medical bill that most of us couldn't handle because we don't have an extra $50,000 sitting around, it would probably be well worth it and
absolutely.
Protect our interests. So thank you for that.
And this is pretty helpful because I know sometimes when people choose, like, just say vehicle insurance, some of the most common insurance that people go for, people don't really look into those small details. They look for the best deal and, for the most coverage they're going to get. But in terms of, how you're going to use your insurance when you need it, a lot of people overlook it.
Well, hopefully, no severe injuries, but it does happen.
Yes.
So it's important.
It's always good to be prepared.
And again, not something that your carrier will tell you because that's money out of their pocket.
Of course. Of course. They're trying to save money like we're trying to save money. But as we wrap up this show, I'm curious, do you have any advice, because this is a college after all, do you have any advice for listeners who may be thinking of going to law school or looking to practice law?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, you have to be passionate about it. Like anything else, this is so much time spent in your business. Mm-hmm. Try out different areas of the law. See if you could get internships or, summer jobs in different areas and find what makes you happy, because, that will make you a better lawyer. I love what I do, and I think that helps me to be the best lawyer I can be.
Noted.
And as a friend of Enza's, I will tell you, she's the one whose lights are on at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and always working very hard for the client. So I'm sure all the clients who, even if they don't know it, appreciate it, and that's why they get a good result and go back to you. Enza, we want to thank you so much for being with us today and let our audience know that we've been speaking with Enza Brandi of the Enza Brandi Law Firm with an office in Huntington Station. Thanks so much for taking time to talk to us today.
Bill, thank you for having me, and Mike, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today. And to our audience, you've been listening to Bill Horan and Mike DeMarco. Thanks for listening to this week's special edition of My Hometown.
We like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to WHPC@ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.